I love Baptism Sunday for a few reasons. Not only because we get to baptize people, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that is later on, but it is one of the few Sundays that I know I pretty much have everyone's attention for a few short minutes. And it's not because you're all leaning in to hear what I'm about to say, although I wish that was the reason. It's because I stand here right on the edge of the pool, and everyone wants to see someone fall in. So far, in all of my years of being here, I've not managed to fall in yet, but today might be the Sunday that we have an unexpected baptism and maybe a little bit of blood in the water. Who knows? Keep on leaning in. I won't be that long, but it is good. Yesterday, we went up to Morecambe. It was my nephew's birthday, so we went up to Morecambe and we went to a little birthday party, had a good time, and then we were by the seaside. So whilst you're by the seaside and we've got 3 children, what obviously the children want to do when you go to the seaside? No, go to B&M Bargains. That's what they wanted to do. So we went to B&M Bargains, and then, even though they didn't want to, we said, listen, we're going to the sea. And it's rare if you've ever been to Morecambe Beach. It's not always the best place, and the tide was at a decent place. It wasn't all the way in, so we could get down onto the beach. It wasn't too far out. It wasn't that muddy. The water was actually quite warm. So it was nice. So we thought, come on, let's do this. This is one of the rare opportunities. We go to Morecambe quite a lot because we've got family up there. And I could count on one finger the amount of times I've managed to get into the sea. But we thought, hey, let's go for a paddle. We weren't planning it. We didn't have any spare clothes, but we thought, let's go into the sea. And so off we went, paddling our feet. And again, like I said, we've got 3 children. One of them being 5 years old. So you can guess what happened when we went to the seaside with no spare clothes, no towels, or anything like that. Of course, he fell into the water. And so little Arlo had an unexpected baptism yesterday. In he went, got a little bit wet. I remember when I was older than Arlo. He's 5 years old. I was about 12 years old, and I grew up on a farm. And between one of the farms and some fields, there was a stream. And they were going to build a bridge over this stream just to make easier access. But they never got round to it. But they did put in the steel. So there was 2 very thin steels crossing over this stream. And I say stream, it was quite a big stream. It wasn't quite a river. And so we always used to cross over this little stream. Just so when we were out working, it was a lot quicker. And one Thursday afternoon, I was heading back, wanted to get home. And what you did, because I had my bike on one steel, me on the other steel, and slowly you would walk over. And can you guess what happened? I fell in. The bike went in first. Then I tried to stabilize myself. Didn't work. In I went. But there's nothing wrong with an unexpected baptism. And I want to look really quickly today at an unexpected baptism that we see in the Bible. And it's a story that many of you will have heard before. We find it in Matthew chapter 14. If you've got your Bibles and you want to turn with me to that would be great. And we find someone getting baptized even though they didn't quite expect to get baptized. And it says this in Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately, so that's Jesus, he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up by the mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat with the disciples on had been battered by the waves, and it was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking towards them by the lake. But when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, saying it was a ghost, and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And so he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and he began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Let me just make a couple of quick observations from this passage. And maybe it'll help those getting baptized today. Maybe it'll help us all as we go through our own lives. But one of the things that I noticed right as the start of this story, right at the beginning, that first section of text that we looked at, it says that it was a stormy night. You see, the wind had been there for a while. The high waves had been there for a while. And all night they'd been battered by these waves. And I think sometimes we think, when I picture it in my mind, and if you've ever pictured this story in your mind, you imagine Peter getting out of the boat into a nice, calm kind of scenario, don't you? That's what it's always been in little pictures, movies that I've seen of it. And there's no storm. But actually, it quite clearly says here that actually all night long, the waves have been high. The wind has been picking up. And they've been battered. So not just a little storm. All night they've been battered. In fact, they've not even been able to cross the lake because of this storm. And I know sometimes we put things off because we think, "Oh, I'm in a storm right now." Actually, the waves are too high. The wind is too big. And I know some people, when it comes to baptism, making this public declaration of your faith, you say, "Let me just get things sorted in my life." But actually, in this story, Peter doesn't wait for the waves to calm down first. He gets out in the middle of the storm. And let me tell you, sometimes we're called to get out of the boat in the middle of the storm. Sometimes life can be hard. And if you wait until everything's perfect, if you wait until, let me just be absolutely 100% certain. Let me make sure I've done 2 years of not doubting in God. Let me make sure that actually I know, I can memorize at least 5 verses from the Bible. You might never do it because there might not ever be a nice, calm sea to get out into. But Peter says, actually, I'm going to get out in the middle of this storm. The other thing I want you to notice right at the start of this story is it was Jesus' idea for them to get into the boat. Have you noticed that right at the start? Jesus didn't even tell, didn't even ask, he made the disciples get into the boat and go out onto the lake. And sometimes we don't understand why. We might have felt called into a situation. Maybe you felt like, "Oh, God, you asked me to start doing something and it's not working out the way that I planned. It's not working out the way that I thought." And you're like, "Why is that? Why is that? God, why have you called this?" And sometimes we never know, but sometimes we can realize God's got a greater purpose for us in that storm. Maybe he wants to prove himself in ways that we would never imagine, but we'll never know unless we get into the boat and we start out in the middle of that storm. And so the disciples start to cross the lake. They start to battle through the storm. And then we read on, and it says Jesus was coming towards them. And I want you to notice this again. Jesus was coming towards them. Why was Jesus walking towards them? Because they couldn't get to Jesus. All night long, they'd been battered by the wind, battered by the waves. This is the 3rd watch of the night, so it's about between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning now. All night long, they've been trying to cross this lake. Not a massive lake, but the storm has stopped them. But Jesus starts coming towards them. So even though Jesus was behind them, he's been over to the mountains, he's been praying, and now he's walking towards them. I want you to notice, Jesus will walk towards you in the storm. Don't ever feel lost. Don't ever feel abandoned. He sees you. He knows you. And he can walk towards you. And then he gets there. And he says these words. Because the disciples are scared. And if you saw someone walking on water, you would probably be scared as well. I know I would. He says, take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. And those few little words in the middle, it is I. Translated ego eimi, which actually means I am. The same words that God spoke to Moses when he was at the burning bush. The other famous passage, exactly the same words. I am. In that moment when Moses was doubting, I can't do this. In that moment when Moses was saying, I'm not good enough to go to Pharaoh. I'm not good enough to be your voice. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm too weak. I've got to stutter. I can't do this. God says to him, ego eimi, it's not about you. It's about who I am. Because I am. And Jesus says the same words to the disciples in the middle of their storm. He says, I am. This storm isn't about you. It's not about you rowing more. It's not about you changing direction. It's about who I am. And as we watch these guys get baptized in a few moments' time, you know what? We're going to hear their stories. We're going to hear about why they're getting baptized. But whilst we're going to celebrate them and we're going to cheer them, it's not something that they have done. It's about what God has done in their lives. We cannot save ourselves. The disciples on that storm, on that boat, could not save themselves. It was only God who could come and say, hey, this is me. I am. And we can reach out to God and we can say, I am. And so Peter, in the middle of the storm, gets out and he starts walking towards Jesus. And somehow, even though he's in the middle of the waves, even though the wind is blowing, he forgets all of that for a few moments and he starts seeing Jesus. But then he starts seeing it again. The Bible doesn't tell us that the storm picked up. It doesn't say us that the waves were even bigger. It's just he took his eyes off Jesus just for a moment and he started looking at the scenarios of life. I love this passage. I preach on it quite a bit. I constantly look at it in my own devotions, in my own walk of life, when I'm studying the Bible, because I love this passage and I think we constantly need to be reminded to keep our eyes on Jesus. Through the storm, through the hard times, through the troubles, keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus. He's the one that will sustain you. He's the one that will get you through. Guys, when you're getting baptized today, that doesn't mean that life is going to be easy. That does not mean that life is going to be perfect. That does not mean that everything is going to go hunky-dory. Do we say hunky-dory? No, we don't. But I've just said it. It doesn't mean that at all. There will be troubles. There will be hard times. What I'm encouraging you to do is to keep your eyes on Jesus. But be encouraged, because even when Peter took his eyes off Jesus for that brief moment, what does Jesus do? Immediately, he reaches down and he takes Peter by the hand and he pulls him back up. Jesus will reach out. Jesus will rescue you. And then together, they walk back to the boat. They climb back on a rather wet Peter. And the sea's calm. The wind stops. In this story, we have this lovely picture then of a calm sea. Like I've said, that might not be the case for you. The sea might not calm, but the presence of Jesus in the boat will make an incredible difference in your life.